Hello everyone, welcome back to Newsroom. I'm Chella Smith. This is your Middle East U.S. entertainment news here on YouTube. I air on Fridays. I bring you the latest on reforms and economics Iraq based on reports put out by the Middle East news media outlets. I do this weekly review and it's based off my interests. Thank you everyone for joining me. Last week we talked about cybersecurity, the Ministry of Finance, the UN, and Green Zone. We're officially back to our normal scheduling. Let's take a look at this week's headlines. The Federal Supreme Court has ruled and decided on case number 132 in its units, Federal 2022. The Federal Supreme Court has considered, and the reasons of ruling are as followed. The member of the House of Representatives, after being elected, do not represent themselves or their political blocs, but rather the people. Therefore, it's necessary for them to work to achieve what they were elected for, which is the people's interests, not to be a reason to obstruct their interests and threaten their safety and the safety of the people completely. The stability of the political process in Iraq requires everyone to abide by the provisions of the Constitution and not to exceed it, and no authority may continue to exceed the constitutional periods indefinitely, because this is a violation of the Constitution and the demolition of the entire political process and a threat to the security of the country and citizens. The penalties imposed on the House of Representatives for not carrying out its constitutional duties is to dissolve the House when there are justifications for it. The Constitution of the Republic of Iraq for the year 2005 has drawn up the constitutional mechanisms for dissolving the House of Representatives in accordance with the provisions of Article 64. First thereof. The jurisdiction of the Federal Supreme Court is limited by Article 93 of the Constitution and Article 4 of the Federal Supreme Court law and do not include the dissolution of Parliament. The Constitution of the Republic of Iraq for the year 2005 did not overlook the regulations and provisions of the dissolution of Parliament, and therefore there is no room for applying the theory of constitution omissions. Shafak News then reports the governor of the Central Bank of Iran, Ali Abadi, announced on Wednesday the launch of IraqiDinar currencies in the Iranian local banks. The governor said in a statement on the sidelines of the Iranian cabinet meeting that took place Wednesday that a quantity of the Iraqi dinars entered the country and will be distributed starting yesterday, which was Thursday. He added that those wishing to perform the 40th visit of Imam Hassan should go to local banks to provide the dinar currency, besides reviewing the exchange offices. Shaleh Abadi continued by saying that 25 local banks have been identified to offer the dinar currency in order to avoid congestion in the exchange offices in the markets. Economy News Baghdad reports the credit rating agency, Fitch, expected the real GDP growth for Iraq by about 8% in 2022 after it was 3% in 2021. The agency said in a report that increases in the average annual oil production will lead to a recovery of 11% in the oil's GDP in 22, which was a constant average in 2021 despite the increase in production rates in the second half of the year 2021. Rapid lending growth, supported in part by lending initiatives from the Central Bank of Iraq, will drive non-oil growth by 4% this year. The report added, although there are some formal restrictions on economy activities linked to the COVID-19 pandemic, they have become largely irrelevant in practice. Shafak News then reports the Chinese ambassador to Iraq, Ku Wei, affirms on Wednesday his country's commitment to the Fifth Initiative for Peace Coexistence, including non-interference in Iraq's internal affairs, while noting that the Chinese agreement comes to enhance trade exchange between the two countries. Ku Wei says in response to the questions from Shafak News agency reporter that Iraq is for the people and for any party or country in the world to respect the choice of the Iraqi people, calling at the same time the political parties and Iraqis to find an appropriate solution to the current crisis. The Chinese ambassador added, Belgium trusts the wisdom of the political parties to resolve the crisis, noting that Iraq is one of the sources of 4 ancient human civilizations. He explains that the Chinese-Iraqi government is to enhance corporations and exchange between the two countries, including the project to build schools in Iraq, and that the embassy does not interfere with the work of projects, and there are more projects within the agreement between Iraq and China. Iraq is China's 3rd largest trading partner in West Asia and North Africa region, and is also China's largest supplier of crude oil, noting that in 2021, the total volume of trade exchange between China and Iraq amounted to $37.3 billion, and institutions participated, and Chinese companies are building a lot of projects, including oil fields, power stations, airports, and schools. Kuwait says that China's companies have made positive contributions towards the reconstruction of Iraq after the war, and Belgium will continue to cooperate with Baghdad to participate in building the Silk Road Belt. Regarding the return of Iraqi students to China to complete their studies, the Chinese ambassador confirmed that the problem has resolved, saying Iraqi students can now enter China's territory without having to reapply for visas. The American newspaper Washington Times criticized Iraq's growing corporations with China, warns that Beijing is using soft power to penetrate the Iraqi economy, especially in the oil sector, in the absence of America's interest, taking advantage of the relations with Iraqi militia and the atmosphere of corporations that exist in the country. The Chinese agreement opened the door wide for Belgium to flow into the Iraqi economy sector, a move that caused Western fears that Baghdad would become a hostage to the Chinese dragon, like many capitals of emerging Asian countries that have plunged into severe economic crisis because of their absolute dependence on Chinese investment. Unlike the West, Beijing provides generous aid to Iraq without imposing political conditions on Iraqi leaders, such as achieving more democracy or pursuing structural reform policy for the local economies, so corporations like China appear more attractive. In October 2019, the former Prime Minister of Iraq signed an agreement with China that activated the oil for reconstruction programs under which dozens of Chinese companies pledged to work in Iraqi's infrastructure in exchange for Beijing receiving 100,000 barrels of oil per day. Shafak News reports the enforced government source revealed Tuesday an upcoming visit by Prime Minister Mustafa al-Kazimi to the United States of America. The source, who requests to remain anonymous, told Shafak News agency al-Kazimi will go to America in order to participate in the meetings of the United Nations General Assembly to replace the President of the Republic, Barham Saleh. And he indicated that the reason for al-Kazimi's departure instead of Saleh is to discuss political development and repercussions on security and economic levels and the opinions of the international communities on this crisis, especially since al-Kazimi will meet with senior officials in the world. Shafak News reports the World Gold Council announced Tuesday that Iraq has maintained its 30th rank globally among the largest countries in possession of gold reserve. The council said in its latest schedule for the month of September 2022, the global central bank added 37 net tons to global gold reserves, noting that the bulk of the rise resulted from purchase from Qatar, 15 tons, while regular buyers of India were also by 13 tons and Turkey bought 12 tons. He pointed out that Iraq maintains its global position after it rose 10th rank last month after purchasing 34 tons of gold to rank 30th out of 100 countries listed in the table, with the largest gold reserves reaching 130.4 tons of gold, which represents 9.5% of the rest of its other reserves. He explains that Iraq has become the 4th largest Arab gold reserves after Saudi Arabia and Lebanon after it was 6th, surpassing Egypt with ranked 5th globally. The United States of America still leads the rest of the countries with the largest gold possessions in the world, with 8,133 tons, followed by Germany and then Italy. On June 27th, Iraq announced the purchase of the new quantities of gold amounting to approximately 34 tons, an increase of 35% over what was in its possessions. It is noteworthy that the World Gold Council, which is headquarters in the United Kingdom, has extensive experience and deep knowledge of the factors that cause markets change, and its members consist of the largest and the most advanced gold mining companies in the world. And you've been watching Newsroom Weekly Review. I'm Chella Smith, your Middle East U.S. entertainment news on reforms and economics, bringing you the latest Dinar news without having to keep up with all the different outlets. I'm here on YouTube every Friday, so don't forget to subscribe. And if you like my content, kindly hit the like button. I have opened up a Telegram group under Newsroom Chella Smith where you can review all my shows, appearances, and also where I'm showing whoever wants to learn how I'm preparing to do my exchange. You can find the link in the community chat by following the instructions to Newsroom Chella Smith. If you would like to join us daily, you can look for the pinned comments of the chat called EDU 102. Newsroom Chella Smith asked to join, where you can join me and our newsroom family on Mondays and Wednesdays, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, for Zoom calls with special topics and guests each week. If you missed those calls due to prior obligations, no problem. You can always join us on Patreon. That link is always pinned in the community chat here on YouTube. I hope you've enjoyed this week's newsroom. Over the weekend, newsroom admin was here visiting from Florida. We had a wonderful visit. It's great to be back in the studio, back to normal. I hope everyone has a fantastic weekend, everyone, and I'll see you next week. Take care.